I also am just going to apologize that if I ever lean really close into the computer, I stopped wearing glasses when COVID started because of masking, and I haven't resumed yet. So sometimes I have to go really close to see my screen. But anyway, without further ado, David and Mark, welcome.
Thank you, Chris. As Chris said, I'm Dave Anderson. I am from St. Cloud Technical and Community College. I'm a biology faculty member there. I've been working in the, there we go. Mark's going to drive the slide deck today and go through a little introductions and then continue on. So I've been doing virtual reality type projects for the last couple of years, working quite a bit with Mark over at St. Cloud State. I got interested in VR at a workshop in 2019. I did a little integration in my classes before COVID hit, but have been working trying to find ways to bring these concepts into my classroom.
And I'm Mark Gill. I'm the director of the Visualization Lab at St. Cloud State University. My entire career has been spent in software development, game development, virtual reality. It's been a passion of mine going back to the early 2000s. I've been with St. Cloud State since 2014, and the Visualization Lab focuses on cross-discipline student engagement. So we try to provide real-world projects and real-world problems for students to engage in and solve those problems through visualization means.
So we're going to start out today with just some basic definitions, so we all are understanding the words we're going to be using. Some may have a good understanding of virtual and the different flavors of extended reality, but some may not. So when we look at extended reality as a big concept of how we can use computer generated graphics in our daily lives, we start out on the one extreme with, or the one side with augmented reality, which is not immersive. We move a little bit further into a mixed reality, which is somewhat immersive, and we finish off with the VR. And I'll let Mark talk quite a bit more about those differences.
So with virtual reality, I'm completely replacing everything that makes up your current reality as much as possible. Certainly everything that you see, as much stuff as you hear as I can. And some people are even looking at how do we provide smells and other sorts of sensations. Augmented reality, I allow you to keep your current reality. So we're looking through something like a camera or clear optics that hang down in front of your eyes, but you maintain that awareness of where you are, and you maintain your sense of being there. So it's your real reality that we're working with. Now, the difference between augmented reality and mixed reality is that augmented reality, I have to give it some sort of marker or some sort of benchmark in the real space so that it knows where to put the computer generated graphics that I'm interacting with. The actual virtual objects are in that space. Mixed reality has a variety of different sensors and camera techniques so that the device itself is actually able to locate itself within the space. An example would be with augmented reality, if I wanted to bounce a ball off of a table, I would have to tell the device where the table was and how to make the ball behave. But with a mixed reality device, I don't. It's able to find the table and be able to find the floor or find the walls on its own. I can just tell it to go do what it's going to do. Now, in recent years, these two technologies have started to converge together. And I think in the very near future, there practically won't be any difference between these two, aside.
And we can see here the difference on the left-hand side there, the virtual reality headsets that we are now seeing quite apparent on commercials and gaining more popularity in society, which is a cell phone, which is the augmented reality. And that mixed reality is kind of somewhere in the middle-ish, is the idea behind where we're headed there. Oh, did we lose our recording? It's coming back.
Yeah, I think
Okay. The virtual extended reality over the last couple of years has literally exploded. You can see 2 years ago there was a $26 billion XR market worldwide. That's expected to be up almost to $1 trillion here about 5 years down the road. So this is continuing to get bigger and bigger and bigger as our technology catches up with what we can envision, how we can use it in our daily lives. We are seeing more of the headsets driving this. Last year they expected about 7 million sold, and about still a relatively small number, but about 18% of Americans last year they expect have used VR. I'll let you take this one, Mark.
so. The pandemic had a big increase in demand on virtual reality and social virtual reality. A lot of face-to-face events, a lot of classes and workshops and conferences got canceled all of a sudden. And so a lot of people turned to virtual reality and social virtual reality as a substitution for this. We did this ourselves at our school. We started off by holding a graduation ceremony for the College of Science and Engineering in a social VR platform. And we've held classes and events and workshops and student research. It's been a tremendous driver for the stuff that we're doing here on this campus. And currently, education makes one of the smallest market shares, but it's anticipated to grow as the business, trade, and the training market start adoption of VR, which we're seeing a lot of that these days, a lot of use cases around business training, industrial training, job training, skill training.
If we look back at a $26 billion global market, the educational market just a few years ago wasn't even $1 billion here in the U.S., but they're projecting that that's going to end up being 10 billion just a few years down the road. So the expectations are that this is going to grow very, very rapidly, but higher ed has to learn how to integrate this and how to use this as a tool as we work with our students. So let's talk more specifically about VR in higher education. There we go. This is just an overview slide looking at what we're going to talk about here. There's a very distinct difference between flat and immersive. We'll get into a little accessibility, cost, learning curves, content, and then management. Yep, go ahead. There we go. So if we look at the differences between flat and immersive, or 2D and 3D, it really is significant. If you think about it, we live in a three-dimensional world, and we have learned in 2 dimensions really up until we had VR headsets. So pretty much all of man's history, we've learned in 2 dimensions ever since we invented paper and the ability to have screens and all that. But that is not how our bodies necessarily are built. So there is a distinct difference in how these learning technologies can and should be used.
Right. So accessibility is another one of these considerations that are addressed by having the 2D versus the 3D client. A lot of applications require both to operate smoothly. And then you have instances where people may not be able to get into a 3D headset, right? They may have vision impairment or claustrophobia or a number of different issues that prohibit them from using the headset. It's important from an accessibility standpoint that whatever you're doing and whatever application you're using has the ability so that people without a headset can get in through something like a web browser or an application or something that they play. Also, offline, not everybody lives in a place where you have really good bandwidth. And if you don't have a solid internet connection, if you live in one of these network shadows that we hear about across the country, then you might have to have options that allow you to participate somehow offline, whether that's delivery of the software, you play it asynchronously. There's a number of different options around that, but it's definitely a consideration. And then the accessibility in virtual reality is really kind of a two-edged sword. A lot of people like to talk about the lack of accessibility because not everybody has the hardware, not everybody can use the hardware. But at the same time, VR opens accessibility for people with other physical impairments. VR doesn't necessarily care if you're in a wheelchair or if you're in a bed or if you have full mobility. When you get in that headset and you get it into a collaborative environment with other avatars and other people, a lot of times those things just don't matter. So it's one of those things that it has issues in terms of accessibility that we have to work on ways to expand that. But at the same time, it opens up new boundaries and new possibilities that we should be able to leverage and be cognizant of.
And there's a great example of that over at Southwest Minnesota State. A few years back, they did. They went out to farms because they have a good sized farming program, and they took 360 videos on the farm, and they were able to bring those back and replay those and show those to students. And they had a student that was in a wheelchair, and there's no way he would have ever been able to get to that farm because of that wheelchair limitation. But he was able to still experience, minus the smell, still experience that farm environment and learn from it in ways that he would have never been able to do before. So it is that balance back and forth between it. We lose some, but we gain quite a bit on another aspect. By far, the biggest thing people think about when they look at VR headsets and VR in education is going to be the cost. Headsets can be quite expensive. It all depends on which headset we are looking at and how we manage them and exactly how we apply them in our classes. Whether we are looking at one headset or multiple headsets, outfitting the whole class with headsets, it can get up into the tens and multiples of tens of thousands of dollars to outfit an institution for that. But beyond that, there are other costs that are behind the scenes we're not necessarily thinking about up front. Do we have an infrastructure? Do we have a Wi-Fi that's going to support 20 headsets all at the same time or more? Do we need to bring in new routers that have that ability? Does our IT even have a clue on how to support this type of technology? I know on my campus, no, not really. They think it's great that I have it, but then they let me go and do it because it's not part of what they do. At some point, we're going to have to replace headsets. It's a shelf life to them. And then we have all of the applications, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. Do we do annual subscriptions? Do we do it per class? How are we going to handle those when we are talking about paid subscriptions that can get quite costly? Some of them way up into the tens of thousands of dollars every semester if you get the really good ones out there.
Another barrier to entry into this environment is the steep learning curves a lot of times associated with this. I get pushback all the time from faculty members who don't want to invest the time in learning new techniques, learning new software, learning new teaching concepts. VR in education is almost an entirely new pedagogy when you think about what you're able to leverage in virtual reality. And some people are opposed to learning new things, and that's fine, right? It's not for everybody, but if you are, then you've got new equipment to learn, you've got new software to learn. If you're going to be creating your own content, then that is an entirely whole new realm of learning and activity. But this learning, I find it to be very rewarding and very gratuitous. Just being able to take whatever I can conceive in my head and make it real and get inside of it and share it with other people and have experiences in it. Choosing the right technology a lot of times is also part of this learning experience. When we started off at St. Cloud State University, working with David and working with other partners, we had to decide which platform that we were looking at or we were going to use. And at the time, there were 36 social virtual reality applications that were out there on the market available to us. Some of them actually really popular and really feature rich. There's one of them that we looked at called Engage, and I'm a huge fan of Engage in terms of its teaching capabilities and what it allows an instructor to do and bring into an environment and share with class. But at the same time, it's prohibitively expensive. If you don't have a generous administration or a copious funding source, then you're probably not going to be able to afford to Engage for any reasonable number of students or class size or curriculum. And then who's going to train you, right? If this is something that you want to take up on your own, one of the biggest challenges is that you have to train yourself. There's not a whole lot of there's not very many resources out there for an educator who wants to learn how to be an educator in virtual reality. There are groups that that will help you if you find them and you seek them out and become a member of that community. Educators in VR is a group of people who exist on the internet, and that's exactly what they are. They're educators who teach in virtual reality. They teach about virtual reality. They teach about creating virtual reality. And it's all different skill levels, from absolute beginners, somebody who's just thinking maybe they may be interesting, to people who have been doing it their entire careers. So communities like that are great resources for people who are willing to take this journey up this learning curve and just want a little bit of help, just a little bit of help. And then
And the person coming from a biology side, Mark lives in this world and has for a long time. I don't, and I didn't. And the learning curve is steep, and it does take time. But when you see what you can do with it and how you can affect students' abilities to understand concepts, it is worthwhile. With that understanding, it's going to be taking time. It's there's lots of learning curves you have to get over, but there are others out there like Mark and some that have been working in this space for a long time that are there to help us and guide us and learn about it. And they're usually patient, and recognizing that down there at the bottom it just smells like nerd. Yes, we are, but that's okay. Not all of our students necessarily see it that way, and we can really have a huge impact if we are willing to undertake and climb that curve that's there. One of the Another of the biggest problems when we talk about how do we use this in our classroom is the fact that there isn't a lot of content out there. But we even have to take a step back from that and say, well, which technology are we even talking about when we're talking content? Most of what I do is with the virtual reality side, but there is some augmented reality, there is some mixed reality. So when we look specifically at virtual reality, we have to start with which discipline. I'm biology. There's a really great program out there, but it runs about $25,000 a year for a class to use. And it's almost overwhelming for students to get into. There are some other classes, or when they get into it, there are some other applications out there that are they're free, but they don't necessarily teach what I want it to teach. They have good information, but they don't necessarily align to my objectives. And so as we look at trying to make sure that we're teaching what we say we're going to teach, does it really add to my class, or was it just fun to use? So there's lots of different things that we have to address as we start thinking about this in our classrooms, and the content is a big one, which is kind of why we're here today, because we took it on ourselves to say, well, we're going to make some, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit.
Yeah, one thing I want to point out about these barriers that we're listing, with the exception of cost, a lot of these things are going to get better with time, right? So this is all new, disruptive, emergent technology, and where it goes from here is really something that we're just going to have to watch unfold in front of us. And I keep making I keep telling people a lot of times, we have a choice. We can do this now ourselves, or we can watch somebody else do it later and pay for their work. And that's the choice a lot of times I choose to make, is to do it myself. But as time goes along, these problems are going to mitigate themselves to a certain degree or another. The content will come along, the hardware will come along, onboarding will get easier and easier as these technologies progress and improve. It's just, where do you fit in that spectrum? How early of an adopter are you? Are you early enough? Are you ambitious enough to try and be a pioneer in this area? And this is an area where people, where just regular people can still be pioneers.
As we look at the last of the hurdles here, management delivery, as I said, my IT department looks at me and says, "That's really cool. Now make sure if you break it, you know how to fix it." And I think there's a lot of IT departments that are in that same type of a state. They're not ready yet for this type of technology. They want to be, but they're just not there, which often leaves it to individual faculty. And that's where I am on my campus. A few of us are working to develop content and integrating it into our classrooms. We're trying to share with our peers as much as we can, but we have to figure out how to do it in our own classrooms and make sure that we can support our students as we do that. Ideally, you've got enough in your department that you can work together and share some of that burden. But as we look at it from a longer term perspective, how do we best implement this in our institutions? And it seems like the library might be the best place to do that. And Mark, if you want to expand on that some, because you've seen that more than I have.
Right. So lots of institutions are using the library to promote, to house, to provide VR to their campuses. And there's a number of reasons for that. One, a lot of libraries are interested in, you see a lot of libraries standing up maker spaces, and a lot of virtual reality experiences and work came from this maker space sort of environment. So it's a natural thing that libraries seem to be gravitating for today. But I think in a broader sense, it's because virtual reality is itself a communication means. It's a medium by which people can communicate ideas and experiences and concepts in a way that they just hadn't been able to before now. So it makes sense that libraries, as a gathering place for communication, a gathering place and a central hub for media, would adopt VR as a way of communicating these experiences and concepts.
So let's talk about the KonnectVR project. What have Mark and I been doing over the last couple of years, and where that might lead more people to be able to get into VR in higher education? So I'm going to before you get into it, Mark, I want to preface a little bit. The KonnectVR project is built on Minnesota Nice. I saw what Mark was doing at St. Cloud State, and it spurred an idea in me. But Mark needs to explain what Minnesota Nice is before we get into the KonnectVR project.
Okay, so Minnesota Nice, it actually came about when the original Oculus Quest started coming out onto the market as a standalone, self-contained, untethered from a computer VR headset. We knew it would have technical limitations, but it should also be able to track itself in a large room scale environment without being connected to a computer. So the idea was that we could get several of these together in a room where the virtual room was mapped to the physical room, and the participants would be able to both see each other, and where they saw each other in the virtual environment is where their physical body would be. And if they saw a table or a wall or a piece of equipment in the virtual environment, there would be something there in the physical environment that would correspond to that. And that was I guess the impetus behind the whole thing between Minnesota Nice is that normally if I get a room full of people all wearing a VR headset, even if they're all running the same application, then they're running 30 individual experiences. And I, as the instructor or the facilitator, I really don't know what any particular one of them are doing. And this was a way that we could get an instructor into a VR environment so that the students could collaborate with each other and work with the instructor to engage in a collaborative group activity, which up until this really wasn't possible in an educational sense. The Minnesota NICE bases itself on what we call the collaborative server. So we wrote a piece of network software that would synchronize the experience between multiple headset users. And we had a number of different applications that we were doing with this. One of the first public uses of this actually was during a music concert. One of our collaborators on the original Minnesota NICE project was a faculty member from the music department. And he had written a piece of music that was intended to be performed live on stage with 6 live performers. And so we had headsets for everybody in the audience, and everybody goes in, they sit down, they put on the headsets, and then the VR experience is being driven by the performers on stage. So a performer on stage pushes a button on a MIDI switch that sends a signal to the server, and that tells all of the VR headsets in the audience what to do. As a result, everybody in the audience gets the same experience at the same time, but it's going to be different from one audience to the next because it is a live driven performance. It was, and then some of the other details about Minnesota NICE, the room scale tracking, the shared environment, all of that stuff was really sort of the driving force. And we had a prototype where people could get together. You could play Jenga. We got a huge Jenga tower set up where you could play against other people in VR with a virtual Jenga table. And what made Minnesota NICE innovative was that when the Jenga tower fell over, everybody saw the blocks fall the same. Normally in a networked, I guess, video game sort of environment, physics like that are handled by the individual clients. So one person may see the tower fall over one way, another person is going to see it fall over slightly differently, because the physics calculations of where the blocks go are done by the individual clients. But with Minnesota NICE, we were sharing the physics data of all the objects in the scene. So that allowed us to have things like when the Jenga table falls or when the Jenga tower falls over, everybody sees the blocks fall in the same place. And anybody standing around can reach out while the blocks are falling and grab one of the blocks. We had objects that were too heavy in air quotes, right? Because it's a virtual object, but it was too heavy for one person to pick up. So it took 2 people to lift this object. We had sort of swords that looked like pool noodles, and you could actually block the other person's swords. This sort of physical interaction between the clients was what really made Minnesota NICE innovative. Also made it a tremendous load on the network. And unfortunately, it died of COVID. So we got it functioning. We had a couple of room scale demos. We had a music performance. And we were just getting ready to get into the evaluation phase and start putting this in the hands of rooms full of students packed into this space, all sharing equipment and walking around. And the pandemic started, and that was it. That was it. In fact, that was it for a lot of the type of work that we do. A lot of the work that we've been doing up to that point was focused on group activities in a space with communal equipment.
I saw the Minnesota NICE project at it was Minnesota State had put together a VR workshop at St. Cloud State, and we went through it. I think it was in December, just before the pandemic. And that it spurred me to say, well, it's great that we can do this. So now let's build some content for it. So I wrote a Shark Tank grant for Minnesota State in 2020 that would work with Mark and his students to create VR labs for anatomy and physiology. Now, that's what I generally teach, and I thought about the idea of having students being able to collaborate in VR and be able to see things and see how the body works and some of the cellular structures and some of the physiology I thought that would be a great use of VR, and collaborative VR even better. Was awarded the grant, and that's been what we've been doing the last 2 years, and what actually turned into the KonnectVR project. So to do that, we had several different things that we had to create, including models, the platform itself, how we were going to collaborate, eventually getting to modules. And one of the important things that I wanted built into this is the fact that we can do assessments within the platform. So the idea being, instructors can load whatever assessments they want and ask questions to students, or have students perform specific activities, and then get those assessments downloaded after the students have done the activities. So we actually assess them while they are doing things. And then, of course, we're always working with that accessibility side, and creating a 2D interface at the end to make sure that everybody has that accessibility. So let's look at how some of the, let's look at these a little bit. Here are some examples of 2D models, or 3D models, excuse me. And Mark, I don't remember, were these ones that we had already, or ones that we had to purchase? Do you remember?
We bought these.
So we purchased these, which sometimes is cheaper. It often is cheaper to purchase something from an online store and then have students modify them, because Mark can tell you all the whys about it, but they come, you can often get them where they work on a computer, but they won't work on the headset. You want to explain? Go ahead, Mark.
So it all depends on what the model is intended for. Some models are made for still rendering or video rendering or 3D printing, and applications like that don't care about the number of polygons or the weight of the geometry or the size of the textures. So they could generate a beautiful looking model that's way too big to fit into a mobile processor like the Quest. So we're looking for models that are technically accurate, but they achieve that level of technical accuracy in a reduced polygon count, in a reduced model complexity. And you can sort of see in this how you somewhere around the edges you get these little sharp edges, and an actual organic skull would have completely smooth contours for most of these natural things. It's little things like that that you don't notice when you're in there working with it, but the model has to be appropriate to operate on a basically a mobile processor, which is what the Quest has in it.
Is that going to play, Mark? Can you make that?
What else is this?
There we go. So this is an example, a short video of the actual platform, or what the students decided to call KonnectVR. In order to make this work, we had to have what I think of as the room to be in. So this was a capstone team last academic year, 6 students at St. Cloud State in the computer science and engineering department. And they worked to create this. It took until about this time last year before we even had a platform ready that we could do anything with. And we kept waiting. When are you going to get us something that we can look at? And when you're talking about developing something like this, it takes a long time to make it so it actually works.
Right. The students were designing this platform from the ground up. Right. So all of the interaction, all of the how do you move around, how do you pick something up? And a lot of the stuff that goes into the platform itself is what was having to be developed, because it's not just enough to be able to say, well, I want to put this green square on the green target. I can say that the green square has to go on there in a certain way. I can say that the green square has to go on there before the red square or the blue square. So the platform is keeping track of sequences and sequences of sequences to make sure that they're done in the right order.
Another thing, building on Minnesota Nice, the collaboration was really important for this project. And this is an example of really, really early, hence you can see the avatars, which are pretty rudimentary yet. But the idea being that students have to interact with each other and do things in a specific order together to eventually make the green light at the end of the table light up. we realize that this in today's world may not happen in the same space, but we're working to make this so it can happen across distances. So even if students aren't in the same physical room, if they have access to a decent internet connection, they would still be able to collaborate within this platform with their classmates, with their instructor, however we want to set it up.
Right. Probably the biggest difference between Minnesota Nice and KonnectVR is that we took the face-to-face shared environment setting from Minnesota Nice and made it distributed so that students can engage collaboratively from anywhere.
Then we have to build the modules themselves. And when I say we, I really don't mean anything to do with me. Me as in a group of faculty decide what we want it to do, but then it's students that are taking that and transforming that into an actual experience. And this is a very rudimentary one where it has some the ability for students to grab a bone, get some information about it, turn it around, see it from different perspectives. But this can be made into the same kind of concept, can be made into many different types of experiences.
Right. And you can sort of see on the menu in the background that it's got a practice mode and a learn mode and then a quiz mode. The idea is that the learn mode, the software would guide you step by step to the material being presented. Practice mode allows you to freely explore. And then the quiz mode would test you on what you've learned and keep track of your performance.
And then we have the 2D interface. So this allows us to have students in that same environment, but doing it on a PC or a Mac. So those that can't get in a headset, don't have a headset, we still have that accessible. We still give them that ability to access it and be able to be in that environment. And it isn't immersive, but it is still a good learning tool.
In some place, sometimes a 2D client may actually be better for certain things than the immersive client. For laying out the labs, laying out the stuff on the table, putting things on the wall, making sure that things line up nicely, making sure that everything is flush and level, and doing things with a degree of precision a lot of times is done better through a 2D client than it is through a headset. So, I mean, accessibility aside, it's always nice to have that option. All right, Dave, you ready?
Yeah, let me get it ready here. Let's see if we can make this work. If you want to let me share here.
I will
It's
stop
thinking.
momentarily.
There we go.
So live demonstrations are always great during a presentation. Okay, so what we're looking at, Dave is wearing an Oculus Quest 2 headset. It's tethered to your PC, and he's streaming the video from what he's seeing into the headset, and that's what we're looking at. So he has a tablet that he can work with. That square over there represents a generic object. It could be anything in particular. But we have tools that allow you to rotate the object and size the object and scale it up and down. And then this has the ability to save this lab experience. So the instructor can come in and position the lab equipment, the 3D objects, input the quizzes, set up the sequences, do all that stuff in this sort of environment. And then when they get done with it, they can save that and use it as a laboratory module.
Trying to hold my headset and my other headset, and there we go. Nope, now it's on my arm.
So VR gives us a lot of capabilities that that we wouldn't normally get in a traditional environment. The software can do things like track how long you're looking at something, for instance, or track your performance in completing a sequence as a task. Do I do it fast enough? Do I do it accurately enough?
That's where I was trying to go. No, that's good enough. They can see what happens.
Okay. All right.
Well, the idea with that lab builder is really to make it so faculty have more ownership, or even students may be able to have ownership and be able to develop things for their classes, for their classmates, and as a teaching tool. So if we can make it so faculty have the ability to develop on their own without the requirements that students or computer or software engineering somebody makes it, it flattens that curve and makes it easier for us to integrate into our classrooms. Now, we are looking at this will be licensed once we have it up and running as an open education resource. We're not sure where we're going to be able to share it because it is code, but we'll find a place where we can put it out there and be able to share it with anyone that wants to use it. And right now we are starting to look at how can we research the usefulness as we look at this KonnectVR platform. And I think we have some questions here, Mark, in the chat. Comment with Lori, I can use Google Earth or videos I've created or found to let my intercultural class walk around the world. A lot of faculty doing that. Some students are on our lab doing what I can do, small groups, group meetings and others, and round robin.
VR is really cool. I mean, Google Earth for VR is almost a reason to get into VR. So I'm right there with you, Lori. That's a Google Earth is a great resource. I use it all the time for a number of different things that you probably wouldn't think Google Earth could be used for. But that's a really good application.
And Ryan's talking about motion sickness. Mark, do you want to talk a little bit about that? You've got more about that than I probably do.
Right. Well, I think my dog has a couple of things to say on motion sickness. Yeah, it absolutely is a real thing, Ryan. It is not just you. A significant amount of the population has a problem with motion sickness, and it's something that the industry is working to address. It's also one of the big advantages of augmented reality and mixed reality over virtual reality. If the augmented object starts glitching out, your brain doesn't interpret that as something being wrong with you, right? Which is what's happening when a lot of people get motion sickness. You get that disconnect between what your eyes are seeing and what your brain is telling your body it's doing. And it can really be disconcerting for a lot of other people. There's a lot of research going on in how to mitigate that and how to reduce that effect in people that do suffer that. But it's 100% a real thing. And it's one of the accessibility issues that we talked about earlier. Some people just don't want to wear the headset because it's going to make them sick.
Moving on to Andrew's question, as far as the assessments in the LMS, that's the intent, Andrew, is that probably next year we'll be looking to have the student capstone team work towards LMS integration. That's our long term, it's on the roadmap, but there's a lot of other things that we need to get worked out first. And as far as the data and privacy, some of that is we're integrating as we're building things from our perspective. Mark, if you want to talk about Facebook and Oculus, we've got a couple minutes.
I've only got a couple of minutes to get on my soapbox about how evil Facebook is. But I mean, it's definitely a concern. We can get around that by putting the headsets in development mode, and we have a development team set up that's broad enough that we can add as many headsets to it. So there is a way that if a student doesn't want to use their Facebook account, they can use one of these development accounts. You know, their headset will think their name is Bob or Susan or something, and it'll be a completely bogus account connected to that headset. But for our purposes, that's not going to matter. We don't collect any data from the student. We anonymize the usernames, and so our system isn't going to really care how you're connected to the headset. And we're really only using the Quest right now because it's the cheapest, most affordable, most technically capable tool of doing this. The very minute an alternative comes out, I mean, the minute an alternative comes out, we're jumping.
But when you can get them for $300 to $500, it's hard to say no and go and spend $1,300 instead.
Yeah, it's right. And I still tell people, right? I can go on and on about how evil what Oculus and Facebook are doing is, and how much I don't like it, right? But if you want to get into the VR market, if you're a consumer wanting to dip your toes in it and get a really good experience, it's still the headset to buy. So, such is our world.
It is. Other questions from anyone?
I had a question. This is Chris. When you were talking about the models that you purchase on, sometimes it's easier to, buy some objects rather than make them, but you had to be careful about the size. When you purchase those, can you manipulate them? In other words, if it's the code or what, can you?
Well, that's one of the things that we have to look for to make sure. That's one of the things that actually makes the model suitable for our use or not, is whether or not it's something that we can manipulate. We also have to look at the license. If we buy it, do we have the license to include it in a piece of software like this? Or so a lot of this stuff is out there available for free, but we have to know, under what conditions. But yeah, being able to manipulate the model or move the model, and then if a model is close enough to what we need, but not quite what we need, is it going to take a lot of work to fix it, to make it. And it's pretty rare that we find a 3D asset out there that is just 100% perfect for us in all ways.
Yeah, I don't think we found any that fit that bill. We had to manipulate everything we bought or downloaded. But yeah, the idea is, as we are developing and revising the models to make them work, is that they would be licensed as OER or as Andrew said, OER friendly, to make it so anybody can use it as they wish. Because sometimes when we purchase it, we have to stay within the license that we manipulated it, but you may not be able to manipulate it after we manipulated it based on the license that we got when we purchased it. So all those fun technical aspects of OER. Other questions? We are at 11:50. I want to thank you for taking the time today to listen to our presentation. Mark's got one more slide with our information on it.
Oh, I do.
There we go.
There we go.
Well, I want to thank both of you on behalf of the summit. This was really interesting. Thanks so much.
Absolutely. I love talking about this stuff.
Yes, he does. And I do as well.
It is the future. I can imagine we're going to be, having teacher training, teaching the future teachers on how to teach in this space for sure.
I'll imagine doing this in a VR headset instead of on a flat screen Zoom. We're not that far away, are we, Mark?
And I love presenting in VR.
Yep.
It's great. It's great.
All right. Well, thank you both so much.
Thank you.
And thanks for the
Thank you.
attendees. Thank you.